They say some defeats echo louder than death itself. Imagine standing on the walls of a sunburned city, hearing the distant thunder of an empire marching toward you, knowing that if you know Rome, mercy will not be swift. This is where Queen Zenobia's story truly begins, not with her fall, but with the punishment that followed, a punishment designed to keep her alive long enough to feel every breath of her own unmaking. Zenobia had ruled Palmyra like a flame held high against the desert wind. She was not born to be small. She spoke with the confidence of scholars and generals, quoting Homer and Plato while leading armies across sand and stone. Under her rule, Palmyra became more than a trade city, it became a challenge to Rome itself. Coins bore her face beside that of her young son, and for a brief, intoxicating moment, the ice bent not to Rome, but to her. This was the unforgivable sin. Rome could forgive rebellion, but it could not forgive dignity. When Emperor Aurelian marched east, he did not come only to conquer land. He came to erase an idea. The battles were fierce, but Rome always had patience. Zenobia's forces were worn down not by weakness, but by the slow grind of imperial certainty. When Palmyra finally fell, the city wept in silence. Zenobia fled on camelback toward the Euphrates, her hair wrapped in royal cloth, her mind racing faster than the animal beneath her. She was not running from death. She was running from captivity. Rome caught her before the river. They always did. Chains are louder than swords. As Zenobia was dragged back to the city she once ruled, the people saw her not as a broken woman, but as a queen still standing straight even as iron cut into her skin. Aurelian met her not with rage, but with a cold, assessing gaze. Killing her would have been simple. Rome did not choose simple. Rome chose spectacle. The punishment began with survival. Zenobia was not executed. She was preserved. Rome stripped her of power piece by piece, like skin peeled slowly from a wound. She was forced to watch her advisors executed, her generals paraded as criminals, her loyalists crucified or enslaved. Each death was a message written directly to her heart, this is what your defiance cost. Then came the journey west. From the golden sands of Syria to the grey stones of Rome, Zenobia traveled not as a queen, but as a trophy. She was displayed in towns along the way, her name whispered by crowds who had once admired her courage. Some spat. Some stared in awe. All understood that this was Rome's warning to the world. By the time she reached Rome, Zenobia had learned a terrible truth. Death would have ended her story. Rome intended to rewrite it. Aurelian's triumph was the stage upon which her humiliation was perfected. On that day, Rome dressed itself in glory. The streets were lined with cheering citizens, petals thrown beneath the feet of marching soldiers. And behind them came the defeated. Zenobia was forced to walk in golden chains so heavy they bruised her shoulders and neck. She wore jewels not as symbols of power, but as mockery, proof that even wealth could not save her. The crowd saw a queen reduced to an object, and Rome drank deeply from that image. Zenobia did not weep. She did not beg. Her silence cut deeper than screams ever could. She walked slowly, deliberately, each step an act of resistance, even as Rome believed it had won. That was the first death. The death of her empire. But Rome was not finished. After the triumph, Zenobia vanished from public view. Some believed she was executed in secret. Others claimed she was spared, allowed to live in exile as a Roman noblewoman. What matters is not which version is true, but why Rome allowed the uncertainty. Zenobia was no longer a person. She was the lesson. If she lived surrounded by luxury that tasted like ash. Imagine waking each morning in a Roman villa, dressed in silk you did not choose, guarded by men who once trembled at your name. Imagine being praised for your grace in defeat while knowing your people starved under imperial rule. This kind of survival hollows the soul. It forces you to relive loss endlessly, without the mercy of an ending. Rome understood this. Rome always understood that memory could be a weapon. Zenobia's identity was slowly erased. Her story was retold by Roman historians who painted her as arrogant, misguided, a woman who dared step beyond her place. Her victories were minimized. Her intellect mocked. Each scroll written was another quiet execution. The woman who once challenged Rome now existed only through Rome's voice. This was the punishment worse than death, to breathe while your legacy suffocates, to live while your name is reshaped by your enemy. And yet, even in this slow unraveling, Zenobia remained dangerous. A dead queen inspires mourning. A living one, humiliated but unbroken, inspires memory. Rome could not allow her spirit to outlive its narrative. So they buried her not in earth, but in silence. Years passed. New emperors rose and fell. Palmyra itself would later rebel again, only to be annihilated completely. Stones were torn down, columns shattered, as if Rome sought to erase even the echo of Zenobia's rule. The city that once challenged an empire was reduced to ruins, a warning carved into the desert. If Zenobia lived to see this, each report would have been another blade. To know that your city, your dream, your people were ground into dust long after your defeat is a cruelty few can imagine. Rome ensured that even time would punish her. This is why some say Zenobia chose death over and over again, not in body, but in spirit. Each day she endured was a surrender forced upon her. Each breath was taken under the shadow of what had been stolen. History often asks whether Zenobia was executed or spared. It is the wrong question. Rome did not care how long she lived. It cared that she was broken slowly enough for the world to watch, and quietly enough for history to forget her strength. And yet, centuries later, we still speak her name. That is Rome's final failure. Because a punishment worse than death only works if the victim is truly erased. Zenobia was not. She survives in fragments, in ruined columns and whispered stories, in the uncomfortable truth that even Rome feared what she represented. A woman who ruled. A city that resisted. A reminder that empires do not only destroy bodies, they try to destroy meaning. Zenobia's greatest defiance was not her rebellion. It was her endurance. After the triumph ended and the streets of Rome were washed clean of petals and sweat, Zenobia's punishment entered its quietest and most devastating phase. There were no cheering crowds now, no chains glittering in the sun, no roar of victory drums. Silence replaced spectacle, and in that silence Rome perfected its cruelty. Zenobia was allowed to live, but life itself was reshaped into a cage with invisible bars. She was taken far from the memory of Palmyra's heat and color and settled into a world of marble and controlled beauty. Rome gave her a villa, servants, and comforts that looked like mercy to outsiders. But mercy was never the intention. Every luxury was carefully chosen to remind her of what she no longer was. Silk dresses replaced royal armor. Gardens replaced desert horizons. Each object whispered the same message: you belong to us now. Zenobia understood power too well to mistake this for kindness. She had once ruled cities, negotiated with kings, and commanded legions. Now her days were filled with polite conversations and measured walks, watched by guards who pretended to be protectors. She was no longer allowed to influence the world. Her voice, once sharp enough to challenge Rome itself, was reduced to something ornamental. The Romans visited her like one visits a living relic. Senators, philosophers, and noblewomen came to see the Eastern Queen, curious to witness the woman who had dared defy the empire. They asked her questions, not to learn, but to confirm their superiority. They praised her intelligence as if it were an exotic trait, something fascinating but safely contained. Zenobia answered calmly, knowing that any display of anger would be used against her. Composure became her final weapon. At night, when the villa grew quiet, memory became her tormentor. She saw Palmyra as it had been, glowing under the desert sun, its columns alive with voices and trade and ambition. She remembered standing beside her son, imagining a future where he would inherit not fear, but strength. Rome had taken that future and scattered it like ash. No wall of guard could stop these memories. They arrived uninvited, cutting deeper than any blade. News from the east came slowly, and when it came, it was always bad. Rome crushed Palmyra's second rebellion without hesitation. The punishment was absolute. Temples burned, citizens slaughtered, the city stripped of wealth and dignity. The message was clear: resistance would not only be defeated, it would be erased. Zenobia learned of this destruction as one might learn of the death of a child, true control words meant to soften the blow, but incapable of hiding the truth. If she wept, it was alone. Rome would never see her break. To show grief openly would give her captors exactly what they wanted. Instead, she carried her sorrow like a hidden wound, letting it shape her into something quieter, harder. Survival became an act of defiance, even as it felt like betrayal to everything she had once been. Roman historians began writing her story while she still lived. This was perhaps the cruelest act of all. They portrayed her as ambitious but foolish, brave but ultimately inferior to Roman order. Her victories were described as temporary chaos, her rule as an aberration corrected by empire. Zenobia knew these words would outlive her. Long after her voice was silenced, Rome's version of her would speak for her. She could not fight this with armies. She could not argue with scrolls carried across centuries. All she could do was endure, knowing that truth often survives in whispers rather than proclamations. Her son, the reason she had dared so much, was gone from her life. Some accounts say he was executed, others that he disappeared into Rome's machinery, stripped of identity and future. To a mother, the difference hardly mattered. The absence was total. Each day without him was another reminder that Rome's victory was not over land, but over bloodlines and hope. Zenobia aged in captivity, though captivity softened its edges until it resembled ordinary life. That was Rome's genius. By making her suffering appear comfortable, they ensured few would pity her. A queen living in a villa did not fit the image of a victim. And yet, every breath she took was under conditions she had not chosen, every step bounded by unseen limits. Sometimes she was invited to banquets, seated among those who discussed politics and war as abstract games. She listened as men spoke of conquest with casual pride, describing cities burned and people displaced as necessary costs of order. Zenobia said little. She had once been part of such conversations, but she had spoken from a place of agency. Now she was a reminder, a warning seated quietly at the table. In these moments, Rome revealed its true fear. Zenobia was kept alive not because she was harmless, but because her death might have turned her into a martyr. Living, subdued, reshaped, she served as proof that even the strongest could be bent. Her existence was propaganda made flesh. And yet, Rome could never fully control what she represented. To some, she was a fallen rebel. To others, especially those from the east, she remained a symbol of resistance, whispered about in marketplaces and caravans. The empire could destroy cities, but it could not erase the idea that someone had once stood against it and ruled. Zenobia understood this, and it sustained her in ways Rome could not predict. Each year she survived was a quiet contradiction of Rome's narrative. She was not forgotten. She was not entirely broken. She lived with dignity, even when stripped of power, and that dignity was something Rome could never fully confiscate. As her life neared its end, Zenobia's world grew smaller. Fewer visitors came. New conflicts demanded Rome's attention. Empires move on quickly, and yesterday's threats become today's footnotes. This fading was perhaps the final cruelty. After all the effort to humiliate her publicly, Rome now allowed her to disappear privately. But Zenobia did not vanish. She remained present in the spaces between official histories, in the unease of Roman writers who could not fully dismiss her, in the ruins of Palmyra that refused to be forgotten by time and sand. Her punishment had been designed to make her insignificant. Instead, it made her enduring. This is why her fate was worse than death. Death would have frozen her at the height of her defiance, preserved her as a single, unchanging moment. Life forced her to witness loss, distortion, and erasure in slow motion. Life demanded she adapt to a world built on the ruins of her dreams. And still, she endured. When Zenobia finally died, quietly, far from the desert that shaped her, Rome did not mark the moment with ceremony. No triumph, no chains, no crowd. Just the passing of a woman Rome had tried to turn into a lesson. But lessons are only as powerful as the memory they leave behind. Centuries later, we still speak of Queen Zenobia not as Rome wanted us to, but as she was, intelligent, courageous, and dangerous to empire not because she lost, but because she dared to rule. Rome punished her by keeping her alive, believing that survival without power was the ultimate defeat. They were wrong. Because in remembering Zenobia, we expose Rome's fear. An empire confident in its righteousness does not need to humiliate its enemies. Rome did. And in doing so, it revealed that the woman it spared was never truly conquered. Her body lived under Rome's shadow, but her legacy escaped it.